Today, south wind 15 knots, increasing to 25 knots. Seas 9 feet. Rain. Tonight, south wind 20 knots. Seas 9 feet. East winds 25 knots. Seas 8 feet.
I became a hunter for the same reason that most hunters do, because my father was a hunter. It tends to move along like that, along a line of patrilineal descent. My father hunted, his father hunted, my maternal grandfather hunted. It was what we did, it's who we were. And it's important to mention here that I was introduced to it as an act of love for the natural world. I know now that that sounds suspicious to some people, this idea of hunting as a manifestation of love for the land and its animals. They might reasonably ask, wouldn't it be the opposite? Wouldn't it be an act of aggression? I'm open to discussing this with anyone who cares enough to share their thoughts. Though I have no illusions, there will always be a rift between hunters and non-hunters.
Go ahead, sir.
Stephen, don't you think these animals you've killed want to live as much as you or I do? In fact, isn't this just a rationalization for murdering innocent creatures? To shoot innocent animals, animals that have beating hearts that run from you simply because they want to live. They're not armed with copper bullets or lead bullets.
I think you're not really asking a question, you're making a point, but I'm going to answer like a question. I would say that if you look at the grand spectrum of species on this planet, you'll not find many that don't prey on other kinds. People say generally, behaviorally and anatomically modern humans have been around for maybe 75,000 years. On this continent alone, people hunted for 15,000 years, notwithstanding the last couple hundred years. So to not hunt is a fairly new experiment in a human sense. To ask a wolf not to hunt anymore is an impossible question. So if someone comes to me and says that they don't want human hunting, we don't want to hunt, I kind of am like, coming from what perspective?
The life is sacred.
Yeah, I know that life is sacred. I admire the deer, but I admire the idea of deer more than the individual deer. And I can assure you that I know more about deer than you ever will. And I've learned that through hunting for them, and I probably care about them in a way that's deeper than something you're going to experience from having a removed perspective on it.
The rift between hunters and non-hunters, it's been around since biblical times. My hope for the future would be that people who don't hunt would come to recognize hunting is a positive force. What tricks people up in recognizing that is the contradiction that I return to all the time. You love animals and you kill them. The South African writer Lawrence van der Post wrote that the San hunters of the Kalahari believed that the stars were great hunters. And when the stars twinkled, they were sharing hunting stories. Whether he was correct in his interpretation of their beliefs is not clear. But reading that forced me to consider this idea that there are as many hunting stories out there as there are stars in the sky. Mine being just one of them that happened to begin when I was very young. Sometimes I do wonder about having been introduced to hunting much later in life and under different circumstances, just to see if I would think of it differently. Because I do admit that I inherited much of my perspective. I reassess it constantly, but the core beliefs were right there waiting for me at birth. My dad hunted deer from up in the trees with his bow. And my two brothers and I spent a lot of time with him, perched up on these portable platforms that we call tree stands, watching anxiously for a deer to come and pass beneath us. It was like we were some family of cougars waiting on ambush. When you turned 12, you were sent off to sit in your own tree. And I remember vividly the fear of the dark when it fell on the woods. And then the relief of seeing my brother's flashlight coming through the trees to find me. Hunting was a glue that held our family together. And I grew up into a guy who writes about hunting and talks about hunting as an occupation. My brothers became professional biologists and ecologists, inspired by hunting to better understand the mechanisms, the interconnected cogs and wheels of the natural world.
There's just not much thought in it early on. It was just kind of a foregone conclusion that that was the sort of thing you would do with Dad when you had free time.
We grew up hunting, and it was just part of our lifestyle, and we always ate off the land. And if I was in a position where I had to defend myself to an anti-hunter, the first thing I would do is make it clear that this is about food. That when I go on a hunting trip, I'm going out there to bring home every usable scrap of meat on that animal and cut it up and get it in my freezer and spend the next year eating it. And, you know, I think that that's one commonly held misconception, is that hunters are out there to satisfy some bloodlust that has nothing to do with food.
The modern American hunter is a lot of different things. I don't think you can make a composite and say this is the average or the norm. I think you're just doomed to failure.
I was born in Buffalo, New York, but my dad's from Chicago, and he was an affirmed city boy.
As I matured as a hunter, I was also maturing professionally as a chef.
I served all my time in the U.S. military and the Navy SEAL teams.
I work for a software development company.
I currently serve in the United States Senate on behalf of the residents of New Mexico.
I was born and raised predominantly in Eddyville, Kentucky, next to the Cumberland River.
I guess it's not the meat, really. I mean, if cabbages had legs and walked around, I'd probably hunt them too.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be, you know, the guy wandering around in the woods, you know, hunting and fishing and trapping.
I had my father up until age 7. He passed away. I then was raised by my uncles. A lot of my uncles were hunters, so they taught me quite a bit about it.
Everybody has their own thing. You like to do crochet and paint your house every day. I like to go hunting.
The average American walking the street does not think highly of hunters, and the way that they're characterized, this kind of macho image of glorifying violence. Hunters in general have a PR problem.
A Tampa area man has some explaining to do after he says he mistook his girlfriend for a wild hog and shot her.
Got
In Zimbabwe, Cecil the lion was as famous as Simba. That is, until this Minnesota dentist came along, like some modern-day Ernest Hemingway. Dr. Walter Palmer paid $55,000 for a license to hunt in Zimbabwe, killing Cecil and skinned for a trophy.
Some rich asshole who wants to go to Africa and shoot a prized lion that's got a GPS collar on it that was right next door to a national refuge. Holy shit. It's the worst example of what hunting is.
Yeah, I would say the most egregious method of hunting would be a kind of trophy hunting.
I do a certain amount of trophy hunting. Sure. We have a 400-acre farm. It's been in my family for 115 years. I spend a few days every year hunting on the farm. Part of the motivation for hunting is what some folks are going to call a trophy. Mounts on the wall. There isn't a set of antlers hanging on our wall that I can't tell you the story of. This would have been an acorn when my great-grandfather bought the place. What kind of tree is this one, Steve?
Hickory.
Kind of hickory.
Shagbark.
Kind of tree is this one?
The maple.
What kind of maple?
Sugar.
Red maple. As I was growing up, you saw something with an antler on it, you shot it. A 3.5 or 4-year-old buck, larger antlers, bigger deer, just didn't exist. And what did exist was a whole bunch of does, 20 or 30 to 1. My brother, Matthew, was the first one who started talking about some of the principles of deer management. Matt was much younger than the rest of us. Matt, of all of us, was the one who was most interested in hunting. He got real interested in the idea of let the small bucks go so that they can get bigger. Eventually, it became the idea of management to mimic what we would expect in nature, more of a 1-to-1 balance, doe to buck. So there was a lot of good reasons for doing it. It was good for the deer, it was good for the freezer, it was good for the trophy management, and as we found out over time, it was also good for our forest and for our crops to try to control that herd a little bit more. The last year that Matthew hunted, he and I had a real successful hunt. Biggest buck I'd seen up to that point. Jumped up in the field across the road from the buildings. I was able to shoot the deer, biggest buck I'd shot up to that time. And my dad says, boy, that's a really good buck, Doug, congratulations. And Matt says, yeah, but that had been a nice buck next year. Matthew was a man of few words, unlike the rest of the family. And when he said that, it stuck in my head. And when he died a couple of months later, it took on even more meaning. Got a phone call from my father telling that Matt had been in a terrible accident and didn't expect him to live. We as a family decided we were going to figure out a management strategy for the farm to honor his legacy and our family's legacy. And in those years, we just, through our NBNY, nice buck next year idea, we kept getting bigger and bigger deer. That's the tree that we came to see. It's since died 7 years ago from Dutch elm disease that they all eventually succumbed to. 10 years ago, the biggest deer that's ever been shot on this farm, and really the biggest deer that's ever been seen on this farm, was shot from here. We named that deer after I killed it. We called it the standard by which all others will be judged. When I saw this deer, it was about 12 years after Matthew died. I'm in the stand 10, 12 minutes, and I hear this down on the edge of the swamp. Biggest deer I ever saw. That was the deer. I knew instantly when I saw it that that was the deer. He walks up within about 25 or 30 yards of that stand, and I put the crosshairs on his chest and pulled the trigger. Was instantly dead. It absorbed all the energy of that bullet. After I shot it, it was just this moment of thinking about my brother, his ideas about let's manage. I was overwhelmed by it, quite honestly. That's the story of the Standard. If you want to call it a trophy, I call it remembrance of a hunt.
In the earliest years of the 20th century, the Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stephenson was still out making initial contacts with groups of Inuit hunters in the Canadian high Arctic. And he describes these hunters' practice of bringing home the heads of bears in order to place their head in their home or lodge so that the bear would be able to observe the hunter and his family. The thinking being that the bear would, in some mystical afterlife, explain to other bears that if you're going to get killed by someone, this guy is a good choice because he's an honorable man. Now, I decorate my home with all kinds of hides and skulls from the animals that I've hunted and eaten. And it does occur to me at times to ask, if they are looking out on me, what do they see?
At the end of the 19th century, there's a pretty influential historian by the name of Frederick Jackson Turner, and he famously decrees that the frontier is closed. In essence, what he meant was that white settlement had expanded across the continent, and he was concerned about what this might hold, as were many others, for the future of the country. Many Americans at the turn of the century believed that America's unique character stemmed from the process of frontiering, stemmed from engagement with wilderness and fighting against indigenous peoples and sort of the conquest of the continent. Among a certain subset, particularly urban men, hunting embodied a certain rugged individualism that they associated with the national character. There have also always been subsistence hunters who hunted for utilitarian reasons out of necessity. But the emergence of the sport hunter as an iconic American figure is something new.
The victory flash electrified Times Square, keyed to the bursting point as the magic word of complete surrender came through.
The end of World War II is a hugely significant moment in the history of hunting. As millions of American men are returning home from tours of duty, sport hunting experiences a surge in popularity. They take to the field in record numbers, many of them for the first time in their lives. As the editor of Outdoor Life put it, you can't expose millions of young men to the joys of living outdoors and using firearms and not make hunters out of them. The number of hunters skyrockets in the 1940s from about 8 million to 13 million. And that means that roughly 1 in 4 American men were hunters.
One of many things I love about hunting is that it pushes me to go to places I would otherwise have no business going. It melds wanderlust and pragmatism. I respect a mountaineer who goes up a mountain and comes down with nothing tangible. But I'm drawn to the kind of climbing that has you coming back down with a load of meat on your shoulders. In anthropology, there's an idea that it was both of those things equally, a curiosity about what's over the next hill and a desire to eat it, that accounts for our species' stunningly rapid colonization of the world. The first Americans who passed through Beringia and entered the Western Hemisphere started hunting this continent some 20,000 years ago. Euro-Americans have been hunting it for 500 years. I think of those earliest hunters often. Would they be surprised that the subject of ethics has become so intertwined with all of our conversations around hunting? How could such an ancient ancestral practice be governed by such contemporary notions about morality and behavior?
It's not a small thing to take an animal's life. It's very intense, it's very emotional.
We're hunting sentient beings who suffer and who are highly complex, who have moral status. There's something that we have to consider now that we're a little more enlightened. The burden of morality, the burden of being ethical.
And when I first see the deer that I'm going to shoot, my concentration is on getting to where I'm going to have a steady, clear, concise shot so that that animal does not suffer. And that's all that's going through my mind.
It might not work out. You might not see the animal, you might not get close enough, you might get winded, you might even miss. But did you do your best to make sure that none of those things happened? And if you don't, you feel terrible.
The fact that hunters themselves acknowledge that there should be a sportsmanlike way to dispatch, say, a deer, that speaks to the fact that they believe that there's a moral and ethical aspect, dimension to that act. Animal ethics, in a nutshell, is to have more people recognize that you're dealing with moral beings, not just objects. Human beings were always thought to be superior, not only intellectually and physiologically in certain ways, but morally. This is a view known as human exceptionalism. And that claim starts to be challenged. The question in animal ethics, it's what makes all human beings morally superior to every animal on the planet? Why is it this way, and should it be that way? And that's a tough question to answer.
The actual killing of an animal, the finality of it is hard to describe. But you've done something that you can't undo.
What does go on between a hunter and his prey? The biologist E.O. Wilson popularized the term biophilia. The idea that humans have an innate desire to connect with nature and other forms of life. Hunting can bring about an extreme form of that. Let's say bio-obsession, where the continued study and pursuit of animals brings about in the hunter feelings of deep admiration, a desire to emulate, and yeah, something akin to love for the animals that they hunt.
When else do you sit down with your pair of binoculars glued to your face and just look at the landscape and look at animals for hours at a time?
It kind of forces you to learn so much. I've never learned so much about a single species of animal as I did when I started hunting whitetail.
Judging bears, what to look for, size of their heads, the size of their ears compared to their body.
Sources of food that I've seen the squirrels eat. Of course, we've got the hickory nuts in our areas, all the acorns.
You're going to become a successful hunter. You have to learn everything about that animal.
Let's call it the psychology of a deer.
Beech trees, they love hitting those things.
Watching animals interact with each other, watching animals interact with the landscape.
Dogwood berries, they like eating those.
You understand them, then you understand where they're going to be at certain times.
I've never seen anything eat a gumball.
This deer call here used to be my favorite one, and it would call in bucks at a pretty good rate. I mean, they'll come charging in, usually with a full erection, and they're there for one thing. No, it's not there. That one doesn't, but that there is a little bit too high-pitched one.
That interplay between loving the game you're pursuing and killing the game you're pursuing and taking that life, I feel lucky to wrestle with those issues. I mean, I think there isn't a single animal I'm going to go after that I don't have tremendous respect and love for and really enjoy looking at as much as I want to go hunt. It's, I think it is a connection to the natural world that very few people get. I mean, I actually think being a hunter falls much more in line with the way we've developed, genetically, culturally, than not being a hunter. I mean, if our forefathers weren't probably, whacking a critter with a rock and a stone and figured out a way to cook it and eat it, we're probably not sitting here. So I think there is a very primal part of hunting that seems 100% natural to me.
Some people would say, well, if it's natural, that's a justification enough that we should do it. So the should just comes from the fact that it's natural. Look, I'm a vegan, but I can't say that there aren't times when I think bacon smells really good. And I smell, I'm like, damn, I could go for some of that bacon. Now, I'm denying myself. You could say, you're not doing what's natural, but I could say, I know I'm not doing what's, quote, natural. That's because I'm a moral being. And that's what moral beings do. We don't always follow through on our instincts. That's what makes you moral.
Could it be true that our canine teeth and our forward-facing predator eyes are really just relics, just vestigial traits, like our wisdom teeth and tailbones? If so, the transition feels incomplete, at least inside of me and inside of many others. There's a psychological piece to being in the woods pursuing my food. Civilization does us the favor of removing us from so many unpleasant and unsightly processes, all of the tasks of life. It allows us to lead cleaner, more sterile, more sedentary lives of our choosing. But we do carry the physical, specialized tools of hunters. We're built for it. That might make you uncomfortable to think about, but it warrants being reckoned with.
Hunting colors everything I am. I wouldn't live in the middle of nowhere with a corgi and pack llamas if I didn't hunt. I started getting some sciatic nerve pain in my left leg. When I found out that the sciatic nerve pain was an extension of back problems, I knew immediately that it was from carrying heavy packs of meat. So I just knew then that if I was going to keep doing the thing that I loved for decades to come, I was going to have to do something differently. So I started getting pack llamas so I could keep hunting and they would carry my stuff. Trying to desensitize his head a little bit. Both of these guys' heads a little bit. Good boy. Good boy. So with this training, desensitization's a big part of it. The way you're trying to get them to do what you want is every time they do what you want, like he's standing still right now, he's not running away, which the first few times I did this, that would make him run away. They do not like to have their feet handled. So then you reward them by walking away. You take the pressure off of him. Like this is just from a few training sessions that I can do this. They're very protective of their feet. Come on, buddy. Give him a kick in the butt.
God, these are nothing like your old ones.
Oh, this guy's way better than the old ones.
Oh, is he?
Not Peggy, but he's way better than Timmy. It's just Steve, you wouldn't believe this guy on the trail. He's fantastic. It's just around the barnyard. I have a very deep love for the places that I hunt. And sometimes it's mixed up with fear. I mean, some of these places are way back in there and they're kind of spooky. I spend a lot of my bow hunting time alone, which is often not fun. It can be boring and grueling, but it requires a level of dedication. For me, personally, when I get an elk with my bow, that's a major accomplishment. And I'm gonna probably not remember the squirrels I shot 2 years from now, but I'll remember every single elk I've ever gotten with my bow. There's been many hunts where I've been on where I've fought the desire to go home every hour, every day for days, and then build my tag. In a way, I feel like I'm stuck being a hunter. I don't have any choice. I can't help it. I have to hunt. That's just what I do. That's what preoccupies my thoughts. That's how I spend my spare time. I'd be powerless to try to make it go away. If somebody took issue with me hunting, my first question to them would be, do you eat meat? Now, let's say that a person that doesn't like the fact that I hunt, but they're a vegetarian or a vegan. I don't know what to say to them. They might have a point.
I do not think that vegans, including myself, are outside the web of killing and suffering. I do not think that I'm morally superior because I'm a vegan. If I eat, a carrot, there's probably some sentient field animal that died in the tilling of the soil. So I have no illusions about vegans or vegetarians being morally pure or morally superior. That's not my brand of veganism. I want that clear. What I am saying is that there seems plenty of ways to deeply and spiritually, if you will, commune with nature that don't involve the killing of a complex sentient being.
When I was young, I first started hearing the word like environmentalist, I was kind of intimidated by it because I just thought it automatically meant somehow that you were against the things that I liked, which is to hunt and fish and trap. Then later I learned that in the hunting world or in the hunting community, we have our own word for it. We just call it conservation. Like a conservationist is an environmentalist with a gun. The conservation ethic came to me out of a very selfish desire to not lose the things that mattered a lot to me. So I'm like, so what would I need to do? What is the best step to protect this landscape where I like to hunt, to protect my hunting grounds, so that I can continue to enjoy it? That was the first step for me. The second step was to all of a sudden be like, okay, I like this spot, and I might not ever go to that one over there, but I'm just gonna extend my desire to protect this place and go like, okay, I like that one in the distance too, you know? And maybe I like something in South America as well. And I think I just very gradually sort of began to have a conservation ethic that stands outside of selfishness. But it took me a long, long time to shed that idea that you could just take and take with no regard to what's down the road.
If it's a perfect morning, it is completely dead calm, and you'll get to your listening spot. Generally, the first thing you hear is a cardinal, and then the tufted titmice are going to start calling, then all the other birds join in. And when the first crow calls, and if all goes according to plan, you'll be answered by a gobbler. And a turkey sees movement, and he'll look at it, and he'll see movement a second time, and he's gone. As soon as it came out of that egg, every movement that it experienced, it interpreted it as something trying to kill it and eat it. If you're good enough to kill a bird every 3 or 4 or 5 hunts, you're a pretty good turkey hunter. We can't forget that we're not turkeys. We're mammals. So when we're looking at a turkey, we're looking at them with mammal eyes. When a turkey's looking at a turkey or a turkey's looking at a decoy, a turkey is looking with bird eyes, with avian eyes. My son came up with the idea, well, you know, why don't you just glue each feather on individually? Well, that'll take too long. That's crazy. Well, then he did it. And it's like everything. It doesn't work every time. But it works enough. I did not grow up hunting turkeys. We had no turkeys anywhere around. I remember the first turkey I saw, which I was in high school, and it was crazy. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe I had seen a turkey. By the time I was born in the mid-50s, North Carolina only had turkeys in the most remote parts. The turkey population started crashing in the 1800s as soon as the settlement started. I mean, these were a large bird, they were good to eat, and people killed them and ate them, and they killed them and sold them for the market. And they disappeared from most of the United States, but it's not that way anymore. Historically, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, we believed that you could take a wild turkey hen and take the eggs, raise them up into young turkeys, and go out and turn them in the woods. And that went on for decades. And it was a massive failure. It just did not work. And the restoration really didn't get started until we figured out how to trap them and how to move them. We started using rocket nets to capture the birds. And it was hunters that funded the whole thing. It was an army of biologists and technicians and hunters all over this country that contributed the money and trapped the birds and did the habitat management that allowed the birds to come back. Now, wild turkeys are found in all 49 states. They're not in Alaska, and throughout southern Canada and down into Mexico. You know, the question is, did I do the restoration in order to be able to hunt turkeys all over the country? And maybe a part of me did. But we get that question a lot. Well, you only wanted to turn those turkeys loose so you can shoot them. And it's like, that doesn't even come close to the experiences and the people I've met and the guys that might raise money and work for years to try to get a wild turkey or elk or white-tailed deer or mule deer or pronghorn restored to habitat. I just don't see that level of commitment with any other wide group of people other than hunters.
These wild animals have a social and cultural value because of what they represent. They represent a social, cultural commitment to their existence and the fact that we have worked so that they can coexist with a civilized society and still remain wild. And that has given them a value. The European method of wildlife management attached wildlife to privilege or property. You could get hung for killing the king's deer. One particular code in England was that if you should take so much as a hair, you shall have your eyes torn out. By virtue of the Declaration of Independence, where the people became the sovereign, those rights and privileges that belong to the royalty passed to the people, and they would be held in trust for the people by the states. The irony is that before and after our decision about who owned the wildlife of this country, we were systematically eliminating. When Lewis and Clark came up here in 1805 and 1806, they described that wildlife resource as a resource that exceeded anything the eye of man had ever looked upon. Just the sheer abundance of wildlife that was out on the Great Plains at that time. 8 decades later, it had fallen to 0. We had become the wildlife boneyard of a continent.
Throughout history, there have been people who hunted for utilitarian reasons or for commercial purposes. So the United States had market hunters. Market hunters were individuals in the 19th century who would go out and kill wild animals to sell their meat or hides to markets in the East.
In 1876, Fort Benton shipped 80,000 buffalo hides down the Missouri River. That's kind of a centennial milepost, at least out in the West, where we were at sort of a maximum killing capacity, not only of the buffalo, but of all wildlife. Theodore Roosevelt, he has intense interest in nature and this passion to go hunting. And he comes to the West to get to a bison before they were gone. He hires a guide named Joe Ferris. They hunt for 7 days, and he shoots a lone wandering bull, and he is so excited that he does a war dance around the fallen bull, and then he gives his guide $100. In '85, he had published the hunting trips of a ranchman and wilderness hunter, and he left a passage in there of a rancher that he had talked to who had made a journey of 1,000 miles in northern Montana. To use the ranchman's own words, I was never out of sight of a dead buffalo and never in sight of a live one. Roosevelt shoots a second buffalo, and his reaction to it is no longer the dance. His commentary about killing that buffalo is a reflection on this nearly gone and vanished species. The this noble beast, and he has a conservation epiphany. And that was a pretty important event. Theodore Roosevelt gets shunted into the vice presidency in 1900 as a candidate on the McKinley ticket, and then McKinley gets shot, and all of a sudden, Theodore Roosevelt's the president. The National Republican Party boss said, "I told William McKinley it was a mistake to nominate that wild man. Now look, that damn cowboy is president of the United States." His first message to Congress was on conservation. He adds 140 million acres to the National Forest System. And in that process, Western District congressmen from 6 Western states panicked. They put a rider on an ag appropriations bill to prohibit him from setting aside any more national forests. He has 7 days to sign or veto that bill. In those 7 days, he adds 16 million acres to the forest system, creates 21 new national forests, signs the executive orders creating those public states, and then he signs the bill forbidding him from ever doing it again. That's leadership. 1 generation later, we have the Great Economic Depression, the drought, and the Dust Bowl. In the depth of that despair, we have Franklin Roosevelt, now president, and he calls the very first North American Wildlife Conference. This is what he told the hunters and the fishermen. He says, look, people, if you want these resources, you're going to have to do it. And the wildlife conservation ethic begins to take root. They put through Congress the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration Act, and has been fueling wildlife restoration for 80 years. The hunters that rose up in the wake of the market shooters rose up with a conservation ethic because it was essential. We wouldn't have hunting if that hadn't happened.
I mean, I think it's worth considering that many of the animals that we see all the time used to be really rare. You know, if you go to places where those species don't have that cultural or economic value, over time they get crowded out. They're not there anymore. It happens all over the world. And it's not that way in the United States. We have not only public wildlife through the North American model, but public lands. Hunters pay for that conservation.
The picture of hunting revenue in the U.S. Is on both a state and a federal level. On the state side, you've got the sale of hunting licenses, tags, and stamps as the primary source of revenue for fish and wildlife commissions, and that's to the tune of about $1 billion annually across the country. That is only paid for by people who are hunting. On the federal side, you've got, stemming from the Pittman-Robertson Act, a federal excise tax on hunting equipment. So it only hits people who are buying hunting equipment. And that money gets put in a federal fund. And that fund is then distributed to these states, but only if they meet certain requirements, right? And the first requirement is that all the money that the states generated via the sale of hunting licenses, tags, and stamps has to be spent by that actual Fish and Wildlife Commission. It can't get diluted across the budget. It has to stay for Fish and Wildlife. And this is the cool part too, is if that money is, for whatever reason, not spent within 2 years, it gets reallocated to the Migratory Bird Conservation Act. In a holistic sense, it's a really, really tight structure. It's an example of pretty effective regulation, and it's cool to see the mechanics of how it all works.
I hunt many things in many places, but I feel best and most fulfilled hunting in places where it's physically difficult and a bit hazardous. I enjoy moving through nasty country. I like to climb. I don't mind suffering the cold. I like being in places where I have to struggle against obstacles. I could get a deer in other places and in easier ways, but intentionally handicapping our endeavors is one of those peculiar hallmarks of our species. In hunting, we refer to this system of handicapping as fair chase. Now, it's a slippery concept in that it's hard to define in a way that everyone is gonna agree on, but it has to do with evening the playing field between predator and prey, diminishing, sometimes greatly, the certainty of the hunter's success. Many of these handicaps are codified by law. Weapons that can and cannot be used, hours of the day that are allowable for hunting, restrictions on age classes and gender of animals that can be harvested. But many hunters go it one better and add layers of personal prohibitions. Weapons they could use but don't. Age classes of animals they could kill but won't. Much of it is subjective. It's deeply personal. Hunting plays out in your head as much as it does out on the land. Your version of it needs to leave you feeling right. It needs to leave you feeling good about what you've done. All hunters need to find that line for themselves. The first time I killed a deer, I was 13. I got out with a rifle in Michigan, where I grew up. It was so close, I couldn't miss. I just held right where I could see on it. Bam! I got up and I ran over there, and I was kind of surprised to see the deer hadn't died yet, you know? And now looking back on it, you just very quickly shoot it again, but I was young and inexperienced, and I didn't know, and I jumped in there and I killed the deer with a knife. And I'd like looking at it, I'd be like, yeah, it was a kind of like a violent act. And I recognize that there's a violence to hunting. It's different than a human on human violence, but there's a violence to it. But I think that it's a funny little exercise to act as though you can be alive today and be a breathing, living, eating person who's dining in restaurants and going to the grocery store, and to somehow feel as though you've escaped the cycle of violence that drives all existence and that drives nature.
Whenever I kill a deer, I always have that degree of sorrow for the animal, for the kill. I don't feel guilty about it, but you feel sorry for the animal and taking him out of life for your benefit. And I don't think I'll ever get over that. I think it's what every hunter should have.
Those emotions should be listened to because they represent the better parts of our nature. The feelings of empathy and sympathy, the feelings of having ended an animal's life. And I think the question then to ask is, Was it necessary what I just did? Did I have to do that? Is that what is my heart telling me about what just transpired?
We're human beings and we're of this earth, and we've been hunting animals for thousands of years, and to think that that no longer applies just because we have technology that allows us to not necessarily hunt anymore seems kind of ridiculous to me.
Why do some people respect every predator but themselves? Think of an owl perched up in a tree, watching for a rabbit that it's going to pounce on and kill. It does not occur to the owl to ask, do I belong here? Do I have the right to eat this rabbit and live? It just is one with the natural world. It's impossible to untangle it as a creature from its impending actions. And I admire that owl. How good to be so unapologetic about one's sharp talons.
Legally and morally, that animal, the instant it dies, it is my property, and I have an obligation to that animal to get it skinned, get it cooled down, keep it clean, and start the long, arduous task of getting all that meat home.
If I'm going to take an animal, I'm going to utilize everything. Everything. We don't let anything go to waste. Whatever we could utilize, we utilize.
I don't buy meat, I just eat game meat. So that is something that I value very highly.
If you're going to take an animal's life, if you're going to consume meat as part of your diet, you have a responsibility to use every last bit of that animal that you can.
If someone chooses to be a hunter and that person decides to say, quote, honor or respect the prey by using all the parts of it and doing it in this kind of honorific manner, does that make a difference morally or ethically? It doesn't make a difference to the animal. The animal's dead. The animal's not going to say, hey, thanks for shooting me and really caring and respecting me. That's better than you doing it maliciously and not caring. The animal's dead.
Most of the hunters that I've known in my life, and I have known a great many, struggle in some way with the violence. But we're the rare few, really, who are willing to reckon face to face with the fact that our lives cause death. As a hunter, you do strive for humane slaughter, which might not happen every time, but the intention is there. And the animal lives in the purity of the natural world, uncorrupted by domestication and confinement, until it passes into the phase of becoming food for me and my family. Who eats more purely than that?
This is just purely personal opinion. I can't back this up with anything. But I think that a lot of people feel in their heart, right, that they want to be a hunter. They feel that need to be a hunter. But they've been told that they can't be, or they've been told that it's wrong. And what they're looking for when they hear about food and this idea of like humane slaughter, sustainable resources, organic, I think that what they're doing is they're finding a way in. Somewhere they know they want to go, but they haven't been able to justify the leap. And they're trying to find emotionally a way to put a foot into that place. And they're just begging for a way in. I don't know how many are going to actually make the leap. But I feel that right now, for some reason, a lot of people are wondering what's been taken from them and how they might get some semblance of it back.
The writer Tom McGuane has an essay about hunting in which he recounts a conversation where someone takes a hunter to task by asking him, "Why do you have to go and kill deer? Why do deer have to die for you? Would you die for deer?" The hunter replies, "If it came to that." The conversation illustrates that central paradox. You love animals, but then you kill some of them. When wrestling with it, I believe it's important to remember that many of our most influential conservationists had a love of hunting that inspired in them a desire to save the land and restore wildlife. My hope is that hunting will continue to do this, to inspire in people a sense of active ownership, active stewardship for the land, many generations into the future.
Those early hunters talked about the generations within the womb of time, to the extent that each generation has a responsibility to the future. And I'm going to sneak into the personal story now. Here I'm out in the national forest. I walk there from my house. I see 3 hunters coming up that trail. And it looks to be a father and 2 young sons. And they're like poster children out of hunter education. Control of the gun, blaze orange, serious expressions. And the father tiptoes up to me and whispers, "We don't want to get ahead of you." Deference to this old guy sitting by the trail. And I said to the father, "I think I know what you're doing, and I want you ahead of me." And so I gave him the high sign, and the kid's face lit up into pre-dawn darkness with a bright smile. And I watched him go up the ridge. And then I thought, here was 3 generations of people meeting in the national forest, enjoying the beauty of living and the joy of life. I put my head in my hands and I wept, because what that meant.